Anya had been working on Pinnacle 9 for 8 months, and in that time, she'd seen things that would make most humans question their career choices. She'd realigned the skeletal structure of a species that had bones like rubber bands. She'd taught breathing exercises to a creature that had 11 lungs. She'd even convinced a rock-based life form that yes, even minerals could benefit from range of motion work. Thank you very much. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the message that pinged her datapad at 0600 on a Monday morning. Report to Commander Opsmarl's office immediately, it read. Priority assignment. Anya stared at the message, then at her half-finished coffee, then back at the message. Priority assignments on Pinnacle 9 usually meant one of two things. Either someone very important had hurt themselves doing something very stupid, or someone very dangerous had hurt themselves doing something very stupid. Sometimes both. She grabbed her coffee and headed for the commander's office, her worn medical bag slung over one shoulder. The corridors of Pinnacle 9 were already bustling with the morning shift change, a kaleidoscope of species going about their business. A methane breather in a containment suit nodded at her as they passed. She stepped aside for a six-legged cargo hauler. Just another day in the most diverse medical station in the known galaxy. Opsmarl's office was a testament to the commander's unique physiology. The crystalline being didn't sit so much as refract. Light bent around them in ways that made Anya's eyes hurt if she looked too long, creating a shimmering presence that filled the corner of the room. Anya, Opsmarl's voice chimed like wind through glass bottles. Thank you for coming so quickly. You said priority, Anya replied, settling into the chair across from the commander's desk, or rather, the space where a desk would be if Opsmarl needed one. What's the situation? The commander's prismatic form shifted, colors swirling in what Anya had learned to recognize as concern. We have incoming visitors, the Ralketh. Anya felt her eyebrows climb toward her hairline. The Ralketh, apex predators from the outer claw systems, a species so notoriously aggressive that most stations required them to check their weapons at the airlock. All of their weapons, including the natural ones, which was impossible and had led to some very tense diplomatic incidents. And they need a physical therapist because, Opsmarl chimed with what might have been amusement, their military delegation is bringing 6 adolescents who managed to injure themselves during the journey here. Injured themselves how? The official report says, training exercises. The way Opsmarl's light patterns flickered suggested air quotes, if crystalline beings could make air quotes. The unofficial report, which I obtained from their ship's medical officer, who was apparently at their wits' end, says the Cubs got bored during the 3-week journey and started wrestling each other in the cargo bay. Anya took a long sip of her coffee. So you're telling me that 6 teenage apex predators gave themselves sports injuries because they couldn't sit still on a long trip? That is an accurate assessment, yes. And you want me to fix them. You are our finest physical therapist, Opsmarl said. And, more importantly, you have experience working with species that could theoretically tear you limb from limb. That's comforting, thanks. Anya set down her coffee. What kind of injuries are we talking about? Pulled muscles, strained ligaments, one sprained tail. They have tails? Prehensile ones. Quite powerful, from what I understand. Opsmarl's form brightened slightly. The delegation arrives in 2 hours. I'm assigning you the largest rehabilitation room. You'll meet with Instructor Larmoth first. He's their guardian and commanding officer. Then the Cubs. Anya stood, picking up her bag. Anything else I should know? Yes, Opsmarl chimed seriously. The Ralketh have never worked with a human before. They may be curious. 2 hours later, Anya understood that curious was perhaps the understatement of the century. The rehabilitation room, usually used for species with multiple limbs or unusual body configurations, suddenly felt very small. This was despite the fact that it was roughly the size of a shuttle hangar, with padded floors, adjustable equipment racks, and enough space to comfortably fit a small spacecraft. It felt small because it was currently occupied by instructor Larmoth. The Ralketh stood a solid 8 feet tall, and that was in a relaxed posture. His body was an unsettling fusion of feline grace and reptilian power, sleek dark scales that shimmered with an oily iridescence, overlaid with muscle that bunched and flexed with every micro-movement. His face was elongated, predatory, with eyes that tracked Anya with the kind of focus that made every prey instinct in her human hindbrain start screaming. Those eyes were golden, slit-pupilled, and currently fixed on her with an intensity that suggested he was calculating exactly how many bites it would take to— "You are the human therapist." His voice was a deep rumble, like rocks grinding in an earthquake. "Anya," she said, proud that her voice came out steady. "Physical therapist, musculoskeletal specialist. You must be Instructor Larmoth." "I am." He tilted his head, a gesture that seemed curious rather than threatening, though with all those teeth visible it was hard to tell. "You are smaller than I expected." Anya was 5'6", average for a human woman. Next to Larmoth, she felt like a house cat facing down a tiger. "I get that a lot. Your species is impressive." "We are Ralketh," he said, as if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. "The cubs are waiting outside. Before I bring them in, you must understand. They are warriors in training. They have been raised since hatching to be the finest soldiers in the outer claw systems. This injury situation is embarrassing for them. And for me, Instructor," Anya said carefully, "they're teenagers who got restless on a long trip. That's pretty universal, regardless of species." Larmoth's tail, thick, muscular, and tipped with what looked like bone spurs, lashed once. "They are warriors," he repeated. "They must maintain discipline. Focus. They should not have been so careless." Anya recognized the tone. She'd heard it from human parents, from Centauri brood leaders, from every species that expected their young to be miniature adults. "With respect, Instructor, they're still growing. Their bodies are changing. Their spatial awareness is adjusting. Add in boredom and close quarters, and injuries are almost inevitable." The Ralketh studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, his posture softened slightly. "You have worked with young ones before. Many species, many ages. Adolescents are a special challenge, no matter what planet they're from." She gestured to the rehabilitation equipment. "Shall we bring them in? I'd like to do initial assessments." Larmoth moved to the door, a fluid, powerful motion that was both beautiful and terrifying, and made a clicking sound deep in his throat. "Enter, and mind your manners." What entered was chaos on 6 legs. The cubs tumbled into the room in a mass of scales, tails, and barely controlled energy. They were smaller than Larmoth, only about 6 feet tall, but what they lacked in size they made up for in sheer, overwhelming presence. They moved like liquid violence, all coiled muscle and predatory grace, even as they tried to maintain some semblance of order. "Line up," Larmoth growled. "Show respect." They arranged themselves in a row, and Anya got her first good look at her new patients. The largest was clearly Nyx, broader in the shoulders, with darker scales that looked almost black in the room's lighting. Next to him stood Tor, leaner but with an alertness in his posture that suggested intense focus. Mako was shifting his weight from foot to foot, his reverse-articulated legs giving him a slightly off-balance appearance. Liss was the only female, her scales a lighter gray-green, watching Anya with open fascination. Rook stood perfectly still, almost statue-like in his composure. And at the end, practically vibrating with suppressed energy, was Quilp, smaller than the others, with scales that gleamed copper in the light. 6 pairs of golden eyes fixed on Anya. 6 sets of retractable claws flexed unconsciously against the padded floor. 6 tails moved in different patterns, swishing, curling, tapping. "A human," Quilp breathed, breaking the silence. "Instructor, she's so small and soft-looking. Are all humans this soft? Can they even fight? Do they have any natural weapons at all? Their teeth are so flat." "Quilp!" Larmoth's voice cracked like a whip. "Silence!" "But, instructor!" "Silence!" Anya bit back a smile. "It's all right, instructor. I've heard worse." She addressed the cubs directly. "Yes, humans are relatively small compared to Ralketh. Yes, we're soft. We don't have scales or natural armor. No, our teeth aren't designed for tearing meat. But we're excellent at problem-solving. We have very good endurance, and we're surprisingly flexible." "Flexible?" Liss leaned forward slightly, interested. "Range of motion," Anya explained. "Our joints can move in ways that might surprise you. It's part of why I'm good at this job. I understand how bodies move, how they bend, how they heal." She picked up her data pad. "Now, Instructor Larmoth tells me you all managed to injure yourselves. I need to know exactly what hurts, how it happened, and what movements make it worse. Who wants to go first?" Silence. The cubs looked at each other, then at their instructor, then back at Anya. "I'll go," Nix finally rumbled. "I am the eldest. I pulled something in my back when Tor tackled me into the cargo netting." "I wouldn't have tackled you if you hadn't sat on Mako," Tor protested. "I sat on Mako because he tripped me." "I only tripped because Quilp grabbed my tail." "Well, Quilp wouldn't have grabbed anything if Rook hadn't—" "Enough!" Larmoth's roar silenced them instantly. "You see?" he said to Anya, sounding exhausted. "This is what I have been dealing with for 3 weeks." Anya couldn't help it. She laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine, from-the-belly laugh that echoed through the rehabilitation room. The cubs stared at her, shocked. Larmoth's eyes widened. "I'm sorry," she managed, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry, but that's just... You're teenagers. You're bored, overcrowded, teenage apex predators who turned a cargo bay into a wrestling ring. This isn't a warrior discipline problem, instructor. This is a physics problem. You can't put 6 energetic adolescents in a confined space for 3 weeks and expect anything other than chaos." Quilp made a sound like rocks in a garbage disposal, which Anya realized with delight was laughter. "She understands," he chirped. "The human understands." "I understand that you all need treatment," Anya said, her professional demeanor returning. "So let's start with assessments. Nix, you're up first. Show me where it hurts." The next hour was a crash course in Ralketh physiology that no medical text could have prepared her for. Their muscle structure was denser than human, their ligaments more elastic. The reverse-articulated legs meant their movement patterns were completely different from bipedal species she'd worked with. And those tails, powerful, prehensile, and apparently prone to sprains when grabbed by mischievous siblings. Quilp's sprained tail was particularly impressive. "How hard were you swinging this thing?" Anya asked, gently palpating the swollen section. "I was trying to grab the overhead pipes. Quilp said. For momentum. In eyed combat, you see, we use our tails for balance, and sometimes as a weapon. You were showing off, Liz interjected. I was demonstrating superior tactical thinking. You wrapped your tail around a pipe, swung in a circle, lost your grip, and crashed into all of us like a meteor, Tor said flatly. Quilp's scales flushed slightly darker. That is technically accurate. Anya added notes to her datapad, trying not to smile. All right, here's the situation. You all have soft tissue injuries, nothing permanent, but you need rest and controlled movement to heal properly. That means no wrestling, no showing off, and definitely no using your tails as grappling hooks. But we must maintain our conditioning, Larmoth protested. We cannot allow ourselves to weaken. You won't weaken, Anya assured him, but you will heal incorrectly if you push too hard too fast. Trust me, I've seen it across dozens of species. Injuries that could have healed in 2 weeks become chronic problems that last a lifetime because someone decided rest was for the weak. The Ralketh instructor looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Anya's tone must have convinced him. What do you suggest? Gentle movement, stretching, flexibility work to keep the muscles from tightening up while they heal. She looked at the cubs. I'm going to teach you some techniques that will help. They might seem strange at first, but I promise they work. Will it hurt? Mako asked quietly. Not if you do it right, Anya said. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do it right. She moved to the center of the room, very aware of 6 pairs of predatory eyes tracking her every movement. First, we're going to start with something simple. Just basic stretches to show you what I mean. Watch carefully. Anya rolled her shoulders, feeling the familiar pull of muscles warming up. She tilted her head side to side, then began a simple neck roll. The cubs watched, utterly silent, their focus so intense it was almost unnerving. She continued with shoulder circles, opening up the joint, then torso twists, rotating at the waist. See how I'm moving slowly? Controlled. That's the key. You're not trying to force anything, just encouraging the body to remember its full range of motion. Fascinating, Liz murmured. Your spine moves so differently than ours. Different structure, Anya agreed. She moved into a standing quad stretch, balancing on one leg while pulling her other foot toward her glutes. This one's good for the large muscles in your legs. Well, your version of legs. We'll adapt it for your physiology. She could feel their attention intensifying as she transitioned to a hamstring stretch, bending forward at the waist to touch her toes. Her fingers brushed the floor easily. She'd always been flexible, and years of demonstrating stretches had only improved her range of motion. How are you doing that? Rook asked, speaking for the first time. Your body bends almost in half. Anya straightened, smiling. Humans are pretty flexible when we... She didn't get to finish the sentence, because all 6 cubs, simultaneously, without any warning or discussion, decided to copy her. And that's when everything went sideways, literally. The thing about apex predators is that they're used to their bodies doing exactly what they want, when they want. They're designed for precision, for deadly accuracy, for movements that flow from intent to execution without conscious thought. The thing about stretching is that it requires body awareness, balance, and an understanding of your own center of gravity. The Ralketh cubs, it turned out, had never really thought about their center of gravity before. Nyx went first, or rather, Nyx went down first. He bent forward, attempting to mimic Anya's hamstring stretch, and immediately discovered that his tail was significantly heavier than he'd accounted for. The weight shifted backward, throwing him off balance. His arms windmilled, a distinctly unpredator-like movement, and he stumbled directly into Tor. Tor, who was mid-bend himself, took the impact with a startled yelp that sounded like metal scraping stone. Both of them crashed to the padded floor in a tangle of limbs and tails. Mako, focused entirely on bending forward, forgot that his reverse-articulated legs meant his knees bent the opposite direction from Anya's. He tried to compensate mid-stretch, his body twisting in a way that nature absolutely did not intend, and made a sound of pure confusion. "This is wrong! Everything is backwards! Why is—" His complaint cut off as his feet slipped out from under him. Liz actually got close to the proper form, her natural flexibility serving her well. She bent forward, her clawed hands approaching the floor, and for a moment it looked like she might actually succeed. Then her claws punched through the padded mat. Those things were sharp and stuck fast. She tugged once, twice, then overbalanced with a startled hiss. Rook, the most controlled of the group, managed to actually touch his toes. The problem was that once he got down there, folded nearly in half, he couldn't figure out how to get back up. His tail was in the way, his balance was all wrong, and he was stuck in a position that growing panic was making worse by the second. "I am uncertain how to proceed," he said, voice strained. And then there was Quilp. Quilp, who had apparently decided that if he was going to do this stretching thing, he was going to commit to it fully. Quilp, who chose the standing quad stretch, the one-legged balance that Anya had demonstrated. Quilp, who lasted approximately 1.3 seconds on one leg before his injured tail threw off his equilibrium entirely. Quilp, who grabbed for the nearest stable object to keep from falling. That stable object was Nyx's tail. "No!" Nyx started to roar, but it was too late. Quilp's weight yanked on the tail, which yanked on Nyx, who was already tangled with Tor. The two larger cubs rolled sideways like a boulder down a hill, collecting Mako on the way. The three of them crashed into Liz, who was still stuck to the floor by her claws, which ripped free with a sound like tearing fabric. Rook, still bent double and unable to rise, tried to shuffle out of the way. He succeeded only in shuffling directly into the path of the oncoming avalanche of teenage predator. The collision sounded like someone dropping a bag of wrenches down a staircase. When the dust settled, metaphorically speaking, since the padded floor didn't actually create dust, all 6 Ralketh cubs were sprawled in a heap in the center of the rehabilitation room. Tails were draped over backs, limbs stuck out at odd angles. Someone's foot was resting on someone else's head. A low chorus of groans and hisses filled the air. Anya stood exactly where she'd been, one hand still extended from her completed stretch, her mouth hanging open in shock. Instructor Larmoth made a sound like a dying engine. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the soft whir of the rehabilitation room's air recyclers and the occasional pained grunt from the pile of cubs. Then, Quilp's voice emerged from somewhere in the middle of the heap. "The human has defeated us with her strange, twisting magic." That broke the dam. Anya tried to hold it in. She really did. She pressed her lips together, turned away, bit her tongue. It didn't help. The laughter burst out of her like water from a broken pipe. Loud, helpless, and completely unstoppable. She doubled over, hands on her knees, shaking with the force of it. "This is not funny," Larmoth growled, but even his voice had lost some of its authoritative edge. He sounded more exhausted than angry, like a parent who'd just watched their children try to fly by jumping off furniture. "I'm sorry," Anya gasped between laughs. "I'm sorry. I know it's not—" Another wave of laughter cut her off. Your warriors were just taken down by basic stretching. From the pile, she heard a sound like rocks in a garbage disposal. It took her a moment to recognize it. Quilp was laughing too. Then Liss joined in with a chirping hiss. Mako's rumbling chuckle vibrated through the heap. "This is humiliating," Tor muttered, but even he sounded more amused than upset. "This is what happens," Nix groaned from the bottom of the pile, "when Quilp grabs things he shouldn't grab." "I was maintaining balance," Quilp protested. "You were panicking," Liss corrected. "Tactical panicking. Very different." Slowly, the cubs began to untangle themselves, sorting out whose limb was whose tail belonged where. They moved gingerly, clearly aware that they'd just aggravated their existing injuries and possibly created new ones. Within a few minutes, they were sitting in a rough circle on the padded floor, looking decidedly less dignified than when they'd entered. Anya finally got her laughter under control, wiping tears from her eyes. "Okay," she said, her voice still shaky with suppressed giggles. "So, we've learned an important lesson here. Do not attempt human magic," Quilp suggested. "Do not copy movements without understanding them first," Anya corrected. "Your bodies are completely different from mine. Different structure, different center of gravity, different joint mechanics. You can't just mimic what I do. We need to adapt the exercises to your physiology." "You didn't mention that before," Tor pointed out. "I didn't expect you all to immediately copy me without asking questions," Anya shot back. "Most species wait for instructions before trying new physical activities." "We are Ralketh," Nix said, as if that explained everything. "We learn by doing." "You learn by falling over each other, apparently," Anya muttered. She pulled over a stool and sat down, facing the circle of cubs. "All right, new approach. Before we do any stretching, we're going to talk about your anatomy. I need to understand exactly how your bodies work, and you need to understand why certain movements will or won't work for you." She pulled up a holographic display from her datapad, showing a basic Ralketh anatomical diagram that she'd studied earlier. "Let's start with the tail, since that seems to be a major balance issue. Quilp, yours is injured. Tell me how it normally feels when you move." For the next 30 minutes, Anya conducted an impromptu anatomy lesson. The cubs, she discovered, were surprisingly engaged students when the subject directly related to their own bodies. They asked questions, lots of questions, mostly from Quilp, and demonstrated movements when asked. Anya took notes, sketched diagrams, and began to formulate a plan. "Your tails are basically a counterbalance," she explained. "They're heavy, muscular, and prehensile, which means they're both a tool and a weight you have to account for. When you bend forward like I did, that tail weight pulls you backward, unless you adjust your stance. See?" She stood, gesturing for Nix to stand as well. "Try again, but this time, before you bend, shift your weight forward onto the balls of your feet. Let your tail extend behind you for balance, like a lever. Slow, controlled movement." Nix followed her instructions carefully this time. His movement was awkward, uncertain, but he managed to bend forward without falling. His clawed hands didn't reach the floor, his body proportions were too different, but he achieved a clear stretch through his posterior chain. "There," Anya said, satisfied. "That's your version of the hamstring stretch. How does it feel?" "Strange," Nix admitted. "But good? The pull in my back muscles is easing." "That's the goal." Anya turned to the others. "One at a time now, please. No more group disasters." They worked through modifications for each cub, accounting for their individual injuries and body differences. Mako needed special attention for his reverse-articulated legs, his stretches. looked almost alien compared to the others, but they worked for his structure. Liss's natural flexibility meant she could go deeper into positions, but Anya had to teach her control so she didn't overextend. Rook needed help understanding how to engage and release specific muscle groups to get out of stretched positions. And Quilp needed to be reminded, repeatedly, to stop showing off. "Your tail is sprained," Anya said for the third time. "That means gentle movement only. No swinging, no grabbing, no using it to poke Tor in the back of the head." I wasn't poking. I was testing his reflexes. Test them with something other than your injured appendage. But that's less fun. Instructor Larmoth, who had been watching from the sidelines with increasing interest, finally spoke up. "I do not understand how this helps their warrior training." Anya looked at him, surprised. She'd been so focused on the cubs that she'd almost forgotten the instructor was there. "Seriously? You don't see how body awareness, balance, and injury prevention help warriors? These are exercises for flexibility, for movement, not for combat." "Combat is movement," Anya countered. "Combat is understanding exactly what your body can do, where your balance points are, how to fall without injuring yourself, how to move efficiently without wasting energy. Every martial art in human history includes flexibility training because flexible fighters are faster, more resilient, and less prone to injury." She gestured to the cubs, who were now practicing their modified stretches with significantly more success than before. "Look at them. They're learning their own bodies, really learning them, not just using them on instinct. That's going to make them better at everything, including fighting." Larmoth's tail swished thoughtfully. "Our training focuses on strength, speed, aggression. We do not teach our young to bend." "Maybe you should," Anya said bluntly, "because right now, your young injured themselves doing something that should have been harmless fun. Their bodies are changing, growing, and nobody taught them how to work with those changes. That's a training gap, instructor." The Ralketh was silent for a long moment, watching as Liss helped Rook adjust his posture, as Nyx corrected Mako's foot position, as even Quilp focused seriously on moving his tail through gentle range-of-motion exercises. "You are very bold for something so small and soft," Larmoth said finally. Anya grinned. "I get that a lot, too." The session continued for another hour. Anya introduced core strengthening exercises, modified planks that accounted for the Ralketh's quadrupedal stance. The cubs were surprisingly good at these, once they understood the principle. Nyx held his plank position for a full 30 seconds, his whole body trembling with effort, but maintaining perfect form. "This is harder than it looks," he grunted. "That's because you're actually engaging muscles you usually ignore," Anya explained. "Your core, the muscles that stabilize your spine and pelvis, they're working overtime right now. That burn you're feeling? That's them getting stronger." Nyx held for another 5 seconds, then lowered himself to the mat with a controlled exhale. "I feel it," he said, then sneezed. The sneeze, combined with his exhausted muscles, sent him face first into the mat, with a muffled thump. Quilp's laughter echoed through the room. The mighty Nyx, defeated by his own nose. "Shut up, Quilp. Make me faceplant. I will sit on you again." "Boys," Liss said wearily, sounding like she'd had this exact conversation 1,000 times before. Anya was beginning to understand the dynamics of this particular group. Nyx was the well-meaning but sometimes clumsy leader. Tor was the serious one, focused and disciplined. Mako was quieter, still figuring himself out. Liss was the voice of reason, often exasperated with her male counterparts. Rook was steady, controlled, the anchor of the group. And Quilp was pure chaos wrapped in scales and topped with a motor mouth. They were, in other words, exactly like every other group of teenagers she'd ever worked with. The scales and claws were just window dressing. "All right," she said, checking the time on her data pad. "That's enough for today. You all did well, especially considering the rocky start." "You mean the falling over each other start?" Quilp asked innocently. "That's exactly what I mean." Anya began packing up her equipment. "I want you to practice these stretches twice a day, morning and evening. Gentle movements only, no pushing through pain. If something hurts, stop and tell me at our next session. Understood?" A chorus of agreement, some more enthusiastic than others. Instructor Larmoth, Anya turned to the adult Ralketh. "I'd like to schedule daily sessions for the next week, if that works with your delegation's timeline. These injuries need consistent attention." Larmoth nodded slowly. "That can be arranged. The delegation's meetings are scheduled for afternoons. Mornings are typically reserved for the Cubs' training, but—" He looked at his young charges, then back at Anya. "Perhaps this can be their training, temporarily." "Excellent," Anya smiled. "Same time tomorrow, then. And Cubs? No wrestling in the meantime. I know you're feeling better, but you're not healed yet. Give your bodies time to recover." "Yes, Anya," they chorused, and she noticed that none of them used a title. Not Therapist Anya or Human Anya, just Anya. Something about that felt significant, though she wasn't sure why. As the Ralketh filed out of the rehabilitation room, still chattering among themselves about the session, Quilp paused at the door. "Anya, that thing you did, the bending to touch your toes. Could you teach us to do that properly? I mean, our version of it?" "That's the plan," Anya assured him. "We'll build up to it gradually." "Why?" The young Ralketh's scales flushed slightly, a high sign of embarrassment she was learning to recognize. "Because when we all fell over, that was the most fun I've had since we left home. But I'd like to be able to do it on purpose next time. You know, with control." Anya felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Yeah, Quilp, I can teach you that." After they left, she stood alone in the rehabilitation room, looking at the slightly torn mat where Liss's claws had punched through, the scuff marks from the great falling incident, the scattered exercise equipment. "Those kids are going to be the death of me," she muttered to herself, but she was smiling as she said it. The next morning, Anya arrived at the rehabilitation room to find all 6 cubs already waiting outside the door. They were sitting in a surprisingly orderly line, tails curled neatly around their feet, looking for all the world like the most dangerous kindergarten class in the galaxy. "You're early," Anya said, keying open the door. "Quilp couldn't sleep," Tor explained. "He kept talking about the stretching, which meant none of us could sleep." "I was excited," Quilp protested. "We never get to learn anything interesting. It's always, attack this, defend that, remember your honor. Nobody ever teaches us about our own bodies." Anya filed that piece of information away as the cubs trooped into the room. Over the next week, that pattern repeated itself. Each session revealed something new about Ralketh culture, and none of it particularly healthy. Their training emphasized aggression over awareness, strength over sustainability. The cubs could tell her exactly how to disarm an opponent in 12 different ways, but they'd never been taught how to recognize muscle fatigue in themselves. They knew combat stances going back generations, but nobody had ever explained to them why warming up before physical activity mattered. "It's like your culture took no pain, no gain, and made it a religious doctrine," Anya said on the third day. watching Mako work through a modified spinal stretch. Pain is weakness leaving the body, Mako recited automatically. Pain is your body's warning system telling you something is wrong, Anya corrected. There's good discomfort, the burn of muscles working, and bad pain, which means stop immediately. Learning the difference could save your life someday. She designed exercises specifically for their anatomy. Tail coordination drills that use their prehensile appendages for balance during stretches. Quilp, unsurprisingly, mastered these fastest. His tail, even while healing, moved with a precision that the others envied. "How are you so good at this?" Liz asked, watching Quilp hold a complex position that required his tail to counterbalance his extended upper body. "I'm smaller," Quilp said matter-of-factly. "Always have been. So I learned to be better at the technical stuff. More control, less raw power." He held the position for another 5 seconds, then released with a satisfied chirp. "Also, I'm just naturally gifted." "Also, you're showing off," Rook observed. "That too." The claw retraction exercises were Anya's idea, born from watching Liz accidentally shred another mat. "You need fine motor control," she explained. "Combat isn't always about extending your weapons. Sometimes it's about knowing when to retract them." Mako struggled with this the most. His claws seemed to have a mind of their own, extending whenever he reached for something. 3 exercise balls met their demise before he started to get the hang of it, and even then, his control was shaky. "I don't understand," he said, frustrated, staring at the deflated remains of ball number 4. "In combat training, we're taught to always be ready to strike. Claws out, ready to engage." "And that's fine for combat," Anya said patiently. "But life isn't all combat. What happens when you want to handle something fragile, or work with technology, or, and hear me out here, not accidentally destroy everything you touch?" Mako looked at his claws like he'd never really seen them before. "I never thought about it that way." "That's because nobody taught you to," Anya said gently. "But you're learning now." The core strengthening work became a daily competition, which Anya probably should have anticipated. Ralketh were naturally competitive, and the cubs even more so. Modified planks turned into contests of who could hold longest. Nix was winning one such competition, his entire body trembling with effort as he approached the 1-minute mark, when disaster struck. A sneeze, the same enemy that had felled him before, erupted from his snout without warning. The sudden convulsion broke his concentration and his form. He collapsed to the mat with a grunt, then immediately tried to get back up. "No, stay down," Anya said quickly. "You held that for 53 seconds, which is excellent. But when your form breaks, you stop. Pushing through with bad form is how you get hurt. But I almost made it to a full minute. And you'll make it tomorrow, or the next day, with good form. There's no prize for injuring yourself by being stubborn, Nix." The spinal flexibility work revealed something unexpected. Liz was extraordinarily flexible, even for a Ralketh. During a modified cat-cow stretch, adapted for their longer spines and quadrupedal stance, she curled her back so dramatically that her head nearly touched her tail. "Whoa," Quilp breathed. "Liz, you're like bendy." "Is this normal?" Liz asked Anya, sounding worried. "The others can't do this." Anya examined her carefully. "Some individuals are just naturally more flexible. It's not bad, but you need to be careful not to overextend. Your joints have more range of motion, which means they're also easier to injure if you're not controlled about it." Liz experimented, discovering she could curl into an almost ball shape. The problem arose when she tried to uncurl and couldn't quite figure out the mechanics. She began to panic, her breathing quickening. "Okay, don't panic," Anya said calmly. "Rook, Tor, I need you two to gently support her shoulders while I guide her tail. We're just going to help her unfold slowly. Liss, breathe. You're not stuck. You just need leverage." With careful assistance, they got her uncurled. Liss sat on the mat afterward, looking shaken. That was terrifying. "That was a learning experience," Anya corrected. "Now you know your limits. Flexibility is great, but control is better." The moment that changed everything came on the 5th day. They were working through their usual routine when Instructor Larmoth entered with another Ralketh. This one even larger, with scales so dark they looked like polished obsidian, and a presence that made Larmoth seem almost small by comparison. The cubs immediately snapped to attention. Perfect military posture. "High Commander Athnir," Larmoth said formally. "May I present Anya, the human therapist, who has been treating our young ones." Athnir's golden eyes swept over Anya, then moved to the cubs, taking in their positions. Mid-stretch, relaxed, clearly comfortable in their work. His expression was unreadable. "So," his voice was deeper than Larmoth's, resonant enough to vibrate in Anya's chest. "This is the human who has my warriors, twisting like prey animals." The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Anya met the High Commander's gaze without flinching. Every survival instinct she possessed was screaming at her to back down, to lower her eyes, to make herself small in front of this apex predator who probably outweighed her by 400 pounds of pure muscle and bad attitude. She ignored every single one of those instincts. "With respect, High Commander, your warriors injured themselves because nobody taught them body awareness. They're not twisting like prey animals. They're learning how their own bodies work, something that should have been part of their training from the beginning." Athenir's tail lashed once, a sharp crack against the padded floor. "Ralketh warriors are trained in combat, in strategy, in honor. We do not need to learn how to bend." "Really?" Anya crossed her arms. "Because from where I'm standing, your young soldiers couldn't make it through a 3-week journey without injuring themselves. That's not a combat problem, High Commander. That's a fundamental training gap." The silence that followed was deafening. The cubs looked like they were trying to become one with the floor. Instructor Larmoth's eyes had gone very wide. Anya was fairly certain she'd just committed some kind of massive cultural offense, but she was too angry to care. These kids, and they were kids, regardless of the teeth and claws, had been failed by a system that cared more about their capacity for violence than their overall well-being. Athenir took one step forward, then another. He moved with the liquid grace of a born predator, and Anya had to force herself not to retreat. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to crane her neck back to maintain eye contact. "You dare to criticize Ralketh training methods?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "I dare to point out that injured warriors are useless warriors," Anya shot back. "And if your training methods don't include injury prevention, then yes, they need criticism." For a long, terrible moment, Athenir stared down at her. Anya could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel the weight of 6 cubs and 1 instructor holding their breath. Then the High Commander did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to come from his chest, genuine and surprisingly warm. "You have teeth, little human. Small teeth, flat teeth, but teeth nonetheless." He stepped back, his posture shifting from threatening to something almost respectful. "Very well. You claim these exercises have combat value. Prove it. Prove it how? A demonstration. 3 days from now, in the main observation deck. Show me and my officers that this flexibility training improves warrior capability. His eyes glinted with challenge. If you succeed, I will consider incorporating your methods into our youth training programs. If you fail, he let the sentence hang. If I fail, Anya prompted, then you will admit that Ralketh methods are superior, and we will discontinue this experiment. Anya looked at the cubs, at Nix's worried expression, at Quilp's barely contained excitement, at Liss's hopeful eyes. She thought about everything they'd learned in the past 5 days, how much they'd grown, how their injuries were healing faster than expected, because they were actually taking care of themselves. She thought about the countless Ralketh warriors who probably suffered chronic injuries because nobody had ever taught them basic body mechanics. You've got yourself a deal, High Commander. Athner's smile showed far too many teeth. Excellent. I look forward to this demonstration. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and human? My warriors do not accept failure. I suggest you prepare accordingly. After he left, Quilp was the first to break the silence. Anya, do you know what you just agreed to? A demonstration in 3 days showing that flexibility training has combat applications, Anya said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. How hard could it be? The cubs exchanged glances. Anya, Tor said carefully, the High Commander just challenged you in front of witnesses. In Ralketh culture, that means if you fail, you lose all credibility, forever. Oh, Anya said. Well, that's just wonderful. Quilp's tail swished nervously. So, what do we do? Anya looked at her 6 students, these teenage apex predators who'd learned to trust her over the past 5 days. She thought about the exercises they'd mastered, the control they'd developed, the body awareness they'd gained. We practice, she said, firmly. And then, we show the High Commander exactly what you've learned. Think you can handle that? 6 predatory grins answered her. Good, Anya said, because we've got work to do. Let's show them what happens when warriors actually understand their own bodies.